Hello and welcome to NewsClick. Today we have with us Professor Aijaz Ahmad, and we are going to discuss a perennial issue in Latin America, the relationship between Colombia, Venezuela and the United States. Aijaz, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Recently, Colombia and Venezuela have actually come together and decided that some of the issues that they have been facing, which had led to even rupturing of the relations between the two countries, withdrawal of ambassadors, etc., they're going to rethink and they're going to come together. Do you think this really makes for a distinct shift in Colombian politics?
Probably, as a general phenomenon, this has been a characteristic of Venezuela-Colombia relations, where they scream at each other, they break off relations, then they get together either by themselves or some friends get together and face everyone's, save everyone's face and so on. When Uribe had become president first, there was a short period of honeymoon between Venezuela and Colombia, and in the subsequent years, they were showing up in each other's capitals after great break of relations and so on and so forth. So in that sense, it is, at one level, it's a sort of a repeat. Santos is the man the new president who has just been elected, who was the defense minister of Colombia against Uribe, and anything that Uribe did, Santos is guilty of. So that's one level of it. What is interesting in it is, to me, that Santos's first action after becoming president was to break with the Uribe legacy in some very significant ways. The first was his appointments. Instead of carrying on the machine that Uribe had built in the party and therefore be a prisoner of that machine, he built coalitions among the new legislators, among the new members of parliament, and built together a coalition which now accounts for something like 80% of the Congress. Brought people into his own cabinet, in some cases in very high-powered positions, ministries, who belong to the opposition. So it's a kind of, what he has done is to build a sort of a ruling class consensus in his government over and above the Uribe machine that he had inherited. That is one. Secondly, I think he has responded to UNOSAR in a way of the Organization of States of the South American countries, in which Brazil and Argentina play the principal role, and which is essentially an organization against the OAS, which is dominated by the United States. He has responded to the initiative from UNOSAR immediately in terms of these relations. He has repeated that sort of thing, as I said, but something very significant has happened, which is that they have immediately announced the formation of 5 commissions to stabilize relations with Venezuela.
With Venezuela alone?
With Venezuela, 5 different aspects of it. Okay. Cooperative policing of the border, even to the extent that certain parts of the border will become binational. I believe that this was a plan given by Venezuela to UNOSAR, and UNOSAR negotiated with Santos, and they have come to an agreement of this kind. To go back and build that famous pipeline, very high-powered pipeline that Venezuela wants to build through Colombia, and give Venezuela an access also to the Pacific through the river system of Colombia and so on. Venezuela, on the other hand, has openly now said that it will not permit FARC to operate from its territory, and that the Venezuelan army will actively seek them out and throw them out of Venezuela, and so on. In addition to that, there is this promise of the land reforms and the promise of returning thousands of acres of land that were appropriated by the Uribe government, taken over. Santos promises that he will restore that land to the peasantry. Which is very interesting to me because Santos is more closely aligned with the big bourgeoisie of Colombia than any other politician at all. So he's actually in class terms very secure.
Old Bogota elite, in fact.
Old Bogota elite, and this 12 years of experience in the various ministries, he has worked assiduously to cement his relationships with different fractions of the Colombian big bourgeoisie. So in class terms, he's very secure. He has got 80% of the Congress working with him. He has opposition inside his cabinet. And as soon as and that will have may have far-reaching consequences for relationships with the United States, because the Constitutional Court in Colombia has said that these agreements which were reached with the United States by Uribe, which gives the United States 7 military bases and gives all kinds of privileges, including legal immunity to American military personnel and so on and so forth. The Constitutional Court has said that this is not an extension of previous treaties. It has to go to the Congress, and unless it is passed by the Congress, it is invalid. Now, there are two different aspects to it. One is that if it is treated as a treaty, then it has to be passed not only by the Colombian Congress, by the Colombian Parliament, but also the US Congress. The other is that Santos has said that my government will look very closely at these agreements, the text of this treaty, and we shall see if it is in the interest of Colombia.
Uribe was anticipating that Santos may not follow his policies, and in fact, in the OAS, the attempt was really to sabotage this Venezuela, any rapprochement with Venezuela, and also lock Santos into a confrontation.
Yeah.
That seems to have...
On the floor of the OAS, not only that, he officially approached the International Criminal Court and the Human Rights Commission of Latin America, officially lodged complaints and asked for investigations on behalf of the Colombian government a week before Santos was to be inaugurated.
At a time when he was really a lame duck president.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it's completely crazy. Precisely. My view also is that he knew what was coming, and Santos has retracted both from the Latin American Human Rights Commission and from the international. He has withdrawn those petitions submitted by the Uribe government.
It's popularly perceived that actually this Uribe stand, or what he did in the OAS, was really in that sense pushed by the United States to see that Chavez and Colombia, Venezuela and Colombia really stay apart.
Absolutely, absolutely. You see, yes, that was the latest and flagrant thing that the United States made Uribe do. But you see, this is a dynamic in Colombia going on, that there are internal pressures in Colombia, have been, to normalize relations with Venezuela, with Ecuador, with its neighbors. And because the heavyweights of Latin America, that is to say Brazil and Argentina, are behind UNASUR, in fact it is they who give it the clout that it has. It's in the objective interest of Colombia to become a full-fledged, active, good member of UNASUR. That is the domestic pressure.
Also, the fact that the economy has suffered greatly because of the break with Venezuela. A huge amount of exports of
70% decline in the last 1 year in the economy. The two economies are completely interdependent. Both have suffered, by the way. One of the reasons Venezuela wants to. Then there are about 5 million Colombians living in Venezuela. For all kinds of reasons, including economic refugees attracted by the new economy of Venezuela and so on, from refugees from war zones, etc. 5 million Colombians live there. Chavez has to be sensitive to this fact. When it comes election time, which is coming in Venezuela, there are these 5 million people floating around, some of whom have become permanent residents, some of whom have become citizens. And they are now very much a part of Venezuelan society and social fabric. Likewise, Colombians. The Colombian government has to be sensitive to this fact. So there are all these interpenetrating things. But above, enveloping all this, enveloping even this perennial tension between shall we do the American bidding, which has earned them $7 billion for their military. Their military is several times stronger than the Venezuelan military because of the American money. Shall we continue with this, or should we become more integrated in the Latin American integration process, normalize relations with our neighbors and so on? This is perennial tension in Colombia. What might be happening, we don't know. Santos is very new. We'll see where it goes. But one speculation one could make is that Colombia is going the way a number of today's dynamic growing societies are going, which is saying, look, American star is declining, America is on a, there is a secular decline, economic decline, which is irreversible in the United States. It's less and less economically profitable for us to be so closely aligned with the United States. It's much more economically feasible for us to get integrated with Brazil, with Venezuela, with Argentina. This is where we belong, and if we are going to go any place economically, this is where we have to go. So again, a regional dynamic where the regionally powerful economies are pushing countries like Colombia to, and this is a Latin American dynamic. When Uribe got up and made all those wild charges and so on, no one supported him. Chile, which has just acquired a far-right government, Mexico, closest ally, Peru, closest allies of the United States, did not vote for him. They either abstained or voted negatively. So there is a certain dynamic of this Latin American integration which actually envelops even the right, because economically, that is what makes sense. So it may well be that the Colombian bourgeoisie, which Santos represents, now has made that. And finally, I think they have killed, assassinated thousands upon thousands of the trade union people, and the result is that the trade union movement is in a shambles. The guerrilla war, they cannot win, but they have been able to contain it in a certain region. With this thing behind them, Santos does not need the far right.
Good. Thanks. This has been a very interesting discussion, and I think Latin America is certainly, the politics in Latin America is certainly one of the more interesting things happening in the world today. Thanks, Aijaz.
Thank you very much
back with us again.
Thanks.